The restaurant was full that night. New Year's Eve in Chicago, the kind of night where the city dressed itself up and pretended that everything was fine. Chandeliers throwing gold light across white tablecloths, women in silk, men in suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Laughter coming from every corner like it was being piped in through the walls. Nobody was watching the door. That was their first mistake. She came in from the cold at 8:47 in the evening. No reservation, no escort, no invitation of any kind. Just a brown coat worn soft at the elbows, a pair of sturdy flat shoes built for walking, and a folder clutched against her chest with both hands like it was the only thing keeping her upright. The edges of that folder were soft, rounded, the kind of soft that only comes from years of handling. Years of being carried from office to office, from desk to desk, from one person who wouldn't help to the next. Her name was Loretta Banks. She was 89 years old, and she had just walked into one of the most expensive restaurants in the city of Chicago with nothing but that folder and a question she had been trying to ask for 3 years. The hostess moved toward her immediately. Loretta walked past her like she wasn't there. A floor manager stepped into her path. She went around him without breaking stride. Every table she passed went quiet, one by one, like lights being switched off. Because there was something about the way she moved that stopped conversation. It wasn't anger. It wasn't confusion. It was the specific, terrifying calm of a woman who had already survived everything she was afraid of and had nothing left to lose except the truth she was carrying in that folder. She stopped at a corner booth near the back of the room. A man sat there alone, navy suit, no tie, a glass of water he hadn't touched. A face built from angles and patience. The kind of face that had seen every version of human desperation and learned long ago not to react to any of it. His name was Preston Wolf, 49 years old. 3 Senate hearings, 2 federal investigations that went nowhere. The man who had dismantled 4 Fortune 500 companies before most people his age had finished paying off their student loans. The kind of man that other powerful men crossed the street to avoid. The entire restaurant was watching now. Loretta sat down across from him. Uninvited, unannounced, completely certain. She looked at him across that white tablecloth, and her voice came out thin, the way paper looks when you hold it up to light. But it carried across that booth like it had weight behind it. She said, "They won't pay me what I earned. I worked 41 years. My husband worked 38. He died waiting. I don't have time left to wait. Can you help me?" Preston Wolf did not call security. He did not signal the manager. He did not reach for his phone, or look around the room, or do any of the things a man like him was supposed to do when a stranger sat down at his table uninvited on New Year's Eve. He folded his hands on the table, and he said, "Start from the beginning. Hi, viewers, here is a question for you. If someone you trusted for over 20 years was secretly stealing from your elderly mother, would you stand by her or protect your marriage? Drop your answer in the comments. Every single response matters. Because what Loretta was about to tell this man was not just a story about a pension. It was a story about 41 years of work. About a husband who died 4 months before he ever saw a single dollar of what he was promised. About a daughter who looked the other way. About a son-in-law who sat at her dinner table every Christmas for 2 decades and called her mom, while he was quietly, methodically, deliberately stealing everything she had left. And it was a story about a system, not a broken system, a working one. Working exactly as the people who built it intended, funneling money away from the people who earned it, and into the hands of the people who were never supposed to have it in the first place. Loretta Banks had tried every door before she walked into that restaurant. She had called the hospital. She had called the pension administrator. She had hired a paralegal from a legal aid clinic on the South Side, who wrote 3 letters and got 2 identical non-answers in return. She had contacted her local alderman's office and been told someone would follow up. Nobody followed up. She had been carrying that folder for 3 years. 3 years of letters. 3 years of phone calls that went nowhere. 3 years of sitting at her kitchen table in the same house she had lived in for 51 years, surrounded by paperwork, waiting for someone to see her. Preston Wolf was the last door she had. She didn't know if he would open it. She didn't know if a man like him would give a second look to a woman like her. She walked in anyway, because that is what Loretta Banks had always done. She showed up. She kept going. She refused to sit down and disappear. What she did not know, not yet, was that the man sitting across from her had his own reasons to listen, and that before this night was over, the folder she had been carrying for 3 years was about to become the most dangerous document in the city of Chicago. Subscribe to Billionaire Tales right now, because Loretta's story is not just about one woman and one pension. Right now, somewhere in this country, there is an elderly person sitting alone, surrounded by paperwork no one will read, calling numbers no one answers, waiting on money they already earned. Most of them will never get it, not because the system failed, because no one was paying attention, because channel exists for those people. Hit subscribe before this video is over, because what we uncovered in this case goes deeper than anyone's expected. And the part that changes everything is still coming. Loretta Banks did not start with the injustice. She started with Curtis. Because that is where everything began. That is where everything that mattered lived. Not in the folder. Not in the documents. Not in the letters and the phone calls and the 3 years of silence from people who were supposed to help her. It all began with a man named Curtis Banks and the 54 years she spent loving him. Curtis was a broad-shouldered, quiet man. The kind of man who didn't talk much but meant everything he said. He wore the same pair of work boots for 11 years because he believed good leather didn't need replacing. He started at Mercy Regional Hospital in Chicago in 1981, hired as a maintenance worker at a time when a black man with a strong back and a willingness to show up on time could build something real if he was patient enough and stubborn enough to outlast every obstacle the world put in front of him. Curtis was both. Loretta joined him 2 years later. Housekeeper. Different floor, different shift, same building. They drove in together every single morning for 38 years. Rain, snow, summer heat that made the asphalt soft. Every morning, the same car, the same route, the same 2 cups of coffee in a thermos Loretta packed the night before. 41 years for her. 38 for him. A combined 79 years of labor given to one institution. One promise in return. The pension was always the plan. From the very beginning, it was the plan. $2,200 a month, joint and survivor benefit, for the rest of their lives. It was not a gift. It was not charity. It was a contract. Signed in March of 1987. Loretta had the carbon copy. She always had the carbon copy. It lived in the folder, protected like the most valuable thing she owned, because it was. Curtis retired in the spring of 2021. The first pension payment was due 4 months after his retirement date. He never saw it, heart failure. No warning, no slow decline to prepare for, no chance to say the things people save for last. Just Curtis there, and then Curtis gone. And Loretta standing in a hospital corridor being told by a doctor half her age that her husband of 54 years was not coming home. She buried him on a Thursday. The following Monday, she filed the survivor pension claim. She sat at the kitchen table that morning, with the folder open in front of her, and filled out every form, with the careful, deliberate handwriting of a woman who understood that paperwork was the only language institutions respected. She included the original contract. She included Curtis's employment records. She included everything they asked for and several things they didn't. Then she waited. 30 days passed. A letter arrived. White envelope, hospital letterhead. 3 paragraphs of language, so carefully constructed it managed to say nothing at all. Processing delay. Her file was being reviewed. Someone would be in touch. Nobody was in touch. 60 days. She called the pension administrator's office. She was transferred 4 times. Disconnected twice. On the third attempt, she reached a woman who told her the file was still under review and gave her a case number that led nowhere every time she used it. 90 days. Another letter. Same language. Same nothing. She hired a paralegal from a legal aid clinic on the South Side, a young woman named Brianna, who worked out of a shared office space with two other paralegals and a printer that jammed every hour. Brianna wrote 3 formal letters, got 2 responses, both identical, both informing her that the pension fund had been restructured pending administrative review. Restructured. That word appeared in every response. Always the same word. Always without explanation. Restructured into what? Restructured by whom? Restructured when and why and where did the money go? Nobody said. Nobody answered those questions directly, not once, in 14 months of asking. Loretta kept every letter, every envelope, every note she wrote to herself during every phone call, the date, the time, the name of whoever answered, what they said, what they promised, what they never delivered. The folder got heavier. The answers never came. And then she found something that made every single delay feel like it had been deliberate from the very start. Her son-in-law's name was on her file, Clifton Hargrove, married to her daughter Nadine for 22 years. A man who came to every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every Sunday dinner. A man who called her mom with a smile so practiced it had stopped looking practiced years ago. His name appeared on the pension administrator's records as her designated financial representative, a formal authorization, signed and notarized, giving him the right to receive communications, redirect settlement offers, and act on her behalf in all matters related to her pension claim. Loretta had never signed that document. She had never seen it. She pulled every record she could access. 2 separate back pay settlement offers, quiet amounts the hospital had generated to make the claim disappear without going to court, had been redirected, not to her bank account, to an account she had never opened, never authorized, never heard of. The name on the redirect authorization was Clifton Hargrove, the man who sat at her dinner table every Christmas and told her to be patient. The man who said these things take time. The man who hugged her at Curtis's funeral and told her everything was going to be okay. Everything was not okay. And Clifton Hargrove was not who she thought he was. But here is what Loretta did not know yet. What she had no way of knowing from her kitchen table with her folder and her spiral notebooks. Clifton wasn't the top of this. He wasn't even close to the top. He was one small, deliberate piece of something much larger. Something that had been running for 6 years before Loretta ever filed her first claim. Something that reached from the south side of Chicago all the way to a glass tower on Michigan Avenue and into the office of a United States congressman who had built his entire career on telling working people he was fighting for them. The pension fund for Mercy Regional Hospital was not managed by the hospital. It never had been. Since 2017, it had been managed by a private investment firm called Aldridge Capital Partners. Offices on the 43rd floor of a building on Michigan Avenue. Glass walls, marble floors. The kind of firm whose lobby communicates without a single word that you are not the kind of person who belongs here. Aldridge Capital had taken over management of the fund through a contract awarded after a closed-door review process that produced no public record of competing bids. The firm managed pension obligations for over 800 retired Mercy Regional employees. Janitors, housekeepers, kitchen workers, maintenance staff. The people who kept a hospital running every single day and whose names appeared in no press releases and no annual reports. On Aldridge Capital's advisory board sat a man named Congressman Felix Drummond, 3-term Illinois congressman, seat on the House Financial Services Committee. A man who gave speeches every election cycle about protecting working families, about holding corporations accountable, about making sure that the people who built this country were not left behind by the institutions they gave their lives to. His name appeared nowhere in Aldridge's public filings. Not as an investor, not as an employee. His title was Strategic Advisor, a designation that existed in no regulatory framework, carried no disclosure requirement, and cost him nothing to hold. What it gave him was access. And what he did with that access over 6 years was move pension obligation funds off the books, money owed to retired workers, money that had been earned, documented, contractually guaranteed. He moved it through Aldridge's investment portfolio into a real estate development fund spread across 3 Illinois counties. The money didn't vanish. It transformed. It became buildings. It became returns. It became private wealth, constructed on top of the retirement savings of people who had spent their careers cleaning floors and had been told to wait. 214 retired workers were affected. Most of them never knew. Clifton Hargrove was connected to one of Drummond's development firms as a mid-level procurement contractor. He was not an architect of the larger scheme. He was a tool, a specific useful tool assigned a specific task. When individual pension claims showed signs of legal escalation, when someone hired a paralegal or sent a certified letter or called too many times, Clifton's job was to intercept, redirect, neutralize, make the problem quiet before it became loud. He was paid per case. Loretta's case had been flagged because she would not stop calling. According to the U.S. Government Accountability Office, over $300 billion in pension obligations have been underfunded across American institutions in the last decade. The workers most affected are low-income service employees, the people who clean the buildings, cook the food, change the linens, kept the lights on. Most of them never know they have legal recourse. Most of them exhaust themselves calling numbers that go nowhere. Most of them eventually stop. Most of them die waiting. Loretta Banks did not stop. And that stubbornness, that absolute refusal to sit down and accept the silence, was the thing that flagged her case. The thing that made her a problem. The thing that eventually led a man who called her mom to forge her signature on a document she never saw. But there was something else. Something nobody had told Loretta in 3 years of fighting. Something buried in Curtis's original employment file that had been sitting in a system Clifton controlled since the week after Curtis died. Subscribe to Billionaire Tales right now, because what we are about to reveal is the detail that stopped Preston Wolf's attorney cold in the middle of a document review at 11 o'clock at night. A payment, a separate benefit, one that had nothing to do with the monthly pension, one that Loretta did not know existed. And when the number came up on that screen, the attorney picked up the phone and called Preston Wolf directly. Not in the morning. Right then. Because some discoveries cannot wait until morning. Preston Wolf had not built what he built by being moved easily. He had sat across from chief executives who wept openly. He had watched men in $10,000 suits plead with him to walk away from deals that would end their careers. He had listened to lawyers, lobbyists, politicians, and billionaires try every version of emotional persuasion that money could construct. And in every one of those situations, he had felt exactly nothing. Emotion, in Preston's world, was a tactic, a pressure tool used by people who had already run out of better options. But Preston Wolf had grown up in Gary, Indiana, in a house where one window was covered with aluminum foil for 2 winters, because replacing the glass was not in the budget. His mother left when he was 7. No explanation that meant anything. Just gone. And the woman who stepped into that absence and filled it completely was his grandmother. Her name was Hattie Wolf. She was 52 years old when she took him in, and she was the most disciplined, most dignified, most quietly powerful person Preston had ever known. Hattie cleaned office buildings downtown for 27 years. She took the 5:15 bus every morning in every kind of weather. She packed her own lunch because buying lunch downtown was a luxury she did not allow herself. She never complained. She never asked for anything from anyone she hadn't earned the right to ask. She told Preston when he was 9 years old that the only difference between a person who makes it and a person who doesn't is whether they decide the world owes them something or whether they decide to take what they came for. Hattie retired at 73. She had a pension claim through the Building Services Union she had been a member of for over 2 decades. Her claim was under review when she died at 74. $400 in a checking account. That was the total. That was the entire financial legacy of 27 years of work and a lifetime of discipline, and a woman who deserved every dollar of what she had been promised. Nobody made a phone call for Hattie. Preston Wolf had been making phone calls ever since. He listened to Loretta Banks for 11 minutes without speaking. His food went cold. The noise of the restaurant, all that New Year's Eve celebration, all that expensive laughter fell completely away. He listened the way he listened to everything, with total stillness, absorbing every word, filing every detail, building the picture piece by piece the way a person does when they already know the shape of what they are hearing, because they have seen it before. When she finished, the barley tea she'd been served had gone cold. He asked one question. Do you still have the original agreement? Loretta opened the folder. Carbon copy. March 1987. The ink had faded at the edges, but every word was intact, every signature clear. 38 years of being carried from place to place, and that document had survived every single one of them. Preston looked at it. He looked at it for a long time. Then he picked up his phone, pressed one contact. It rang twice. Get Warren on the line, tonight. He set the phone down. He looked at Loretta directly. Don't sign anything. Don't speak to anyone from that hospital or that firm. Don't let your son-in-law into your house. Loretta's breath stopped for just a moment. How did you know about Clifton? Preston's expression did not change. Because I know this scheme. I've seen the shape of it before. And I know exactly where it leads. What he did not tell her, not that night, was that the name Aldridge Capital was not new to him. 3 years earlier, a deal had crossed his desk involving Aldridge and a municipal pension restructuring in downstate Illinois. The deal had collapsed. People had walked away quietly. Preston had flagged the firm internally and set it aside, waiting. Waiting for what? Exactly, he hadn't been able to say at the time. Now he knew. An 89-year-old woman had just walked across a restaurant and handed him the reason. Warren Ossie filed the first motion 48 hours later. And when Aldridge Capital's legal team saw his name on the paperwork, 3 senior partners convened an emergency call before 9 in the morning. Because Warren Ossie appearing on a filing did not mean a routine dispute. It meant Preston Wolf had decided to take personal interest. And in certain circles, those 2 words meant something no courtroom could fully translate. The machine was about to meet the one force it had never planned for. In the next part of this story, Warren Ossie does not send letters. He sends subpoenas. 3 of them. Landing simultaneously on a Tuesday morning, before anyone has had the chance to coordinate a single response. And what his forensic accountant finds buried inside Aldridge Capital's records: a shell company, a forged signature, and a payment that was generated the week Curtis Banks died and redirected before Loretta ever knew it existed, will change the entire scope of this case. The number that stops Warren cold in the middle of that document review is not the pension amount. It is something else entirely. And it has Loretta's name on it. Warren Ossie did not send letters. He sent subpoenas, 3 of them, prepared overnight, signed before dawn, and served simultaneously as a Tuesday morning before a single person at Aldridge Capital. In Clifton Hargrove's household, or inside Congressman Felix Drummond's district office, had finished their first cup of coffee. That was not an accident. That was Warren. He had built his entire legal career on the understanding that the most dangerous moment for people who had been hiding something was the moment they realized everyone knew at the same time, and there was no one left to coordinate a story with. Aldridge Capital's legal team called him within the hour. They were professional, controlled, the kind of controlled that takes years of expensive training to maintain when the ground is shifting beneath you. They told Warren this was a routine pension administration matter, and that their client was fully prepared to cooperate with any reasonable inquiry. Warren listened to every word. Then he said, "My client has a signed contract from 1987, a forged authorization document, and 41 years of verified contribution records. Call me back when you're ready to discuss numbers." He hung up before they could respond. Clifton found out when Nadine called him at 7 in the morning, her voice climbing in a way it only did when something had gone badly wrong. The subpoena had been served at their home address. His name, printed in formal legal language, on a federal document sitting on his kitchen counter next to his coffee mug. He drove to Loretta's house that afternoon. He sat across from her at the same kitchen table where she had spent 3 years building her case alone. He was calm, rehearsed. He had the look of a man who had prepared for this conversation, the way an actor prepares for a difficult scene, running the lines until they felt natural. He told her that Preston Wolfe was using her, that this was bigger than her pension, that a man like Preston did not get involved in cases like this out of kindness, that there was a business angle she wasn't seeing, and that if she dropped the legal action, he could arrange a quiet settlement. More than she would get in court, he said. Faster, cleaner, better for everyone. He used the word family 4 times in 6 minutes. Loretta let him finish. She looked at him across that table. At the man who had sat in that same chair for 22 years of holidays and Sunday dinners. The man who had hugged her at Curtis's funeral. The man who had told her every single time she called, frustrated and exhausted, that these things take time, that the system was slow, that she needed to be patient. You called me Mom, she said. Her voice was quiet, absolutely quiet. For 22 years, every Christmas, every Sunday. You sat at this table and called me Mom while you were taking from me. Clifton opened his mouth. Get out of my house. Not loud, not sharp, just final. The kind of sentence that doesn't leave room for anything after it. He left. Nadine came the next morning. Different approach, different weapon. She sat in the same chair and she cried. Real tears, the kind that come from genuine fear. And Loretta understood that her daughter was not a master strategist. Nadine was a woman who had chosen a man and then chosen, year after year, not to look too closely at what that man was doing. She told Loretta she was going to destroy the family, that Clifton had made mistakes, but he was not a bad person, that they had children, that a federal case would take everything. Loretta listened to all of it without interrupting. I had a husband, she said when Nadine finished. He worked 38 years for the Shannon. He died before he saw $1 of what he was owed. You want to talk to me about what is fair for your family? Go home, Nadine. Nadine went home, and Warren kept working. His forensic accountant was a woman named Gloria Trent, who had spent 17 years untangling financial fraud for federal prosecutors before moving into private practice. She was methodical, relentless, and constitutionally incapable of leaving a number unexplained. Preston had used her 3 times before. She had never once failed to find what was there to be found. She completed her review of Aldridge Capital's internal records in 6 days. What she found was not a paperwork error. It was not an administrative oversight, or a processing backlog, or any of the language Aldridge's lawyers had been using for years to explain the gap between what retired workers were owed and what they received. It was a structure, a deliberate, layered, carefully constructed financial structure designed to move pension obligation funds off the books, while leaving just enough documentation to suggest legitimacy if anyone looked casually. A shell company registered in Delaware, incorporated quietly in 2018. No website, no public profile, no operational footprint of any kind. Its name was Hargrove Aldridge Holdings LLC. The name on its founding documents. The name listed as managing partner. The name that appeared on every internal transfer authorization between Aldridge Capital and that shell company over a period of 6 years. Clifton Hargrove. Not a mid-level contractor given a small task. Not a peripheral figure doing minor work on the edges of someone else's scheme. A named partner. A co-architect. A man who had sat at Loretta's kitchen table calling her mom while his name was on the legal structure being used to redirect $47 million in pension obligations away from the people who had earned every cent of it. 214 retired workers. That was the number Gloria Trent pulled from the records. 214 people who had given decades of service to Mercy Regional Hospital. and whose pension payments had been quietly, systematically manipulated through the same mechanism. Loretta Banks was one of 214. Warren called Preston the night Gloria submitted her findings. The call lasted 4 minutes. At the end of it, Preston said, "Make sure she's sitting down when you tell her." But that was not the discovery that had stopped Gloria Trent cold at 11 o'clock at night and made her pick up the phone before she had finished reading the full document. There was something else, buried in Curtis Banks' original employment file. A benefit rider. A clause attached to his 1987 contract that was separate from the monthly pension, triggered automatically upon the death of a vested employee, payable to the surviving spouse within 90 days. $180,000. Curtis Banks had earned a survivor benefit payment of $180,000. It had been generated automatically when he retired in the spring of 2021. A payment notification had been sent to the address on file with the pension administrator. The address on file had been changed 6 weeks before Curtis died, changed to a post office box registered to Clifton Hargrove. Loretta had never received the notification. She had never been told the benefit existed. Not by the hospital, not by the pension administrator, not by Aldridge Capital, not by the son-in-law who received the redirect and said nothing. For 3 years, while she sat at that kitchen table, fighting for $2,200 a month, there had been a $180,000 payment with her name on it, sitting in a system her son-in-law controlled. Curtis had earned it. It belonged to her. And it had been invisible to her the entire time, subscribed to Billionaire Tales. Because what happens in that federal courtroom next is the moment every carefully constructed lie these men built came apart in public, under oath, in front of a judge who had seen enough financial fraud in her career to recognize it, in the first 30 pages of a filing. The moment Loretta Banks stepped onto that witness stand, the entire room changed. And nobody who was there that morning forgot what she did next. The civil hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in February, Dirksen Federal Building, downtown Chicago, a courtroom that had seen decades of financial cases pass through it. White-collar proceedings that slowly and quietly, through a process most ordinary people never witnessed and never fully understood. This one was different. The gallery was full by 8:30. Retired workers, former hospital employees, people who had received the same letters, made the same phone calls, been told the same things for years. They came because word had moved through their community the way important news always does, quietly, person to person, until everyone who needed to know did. Clifton arrived with 2 attorneys. Drummond's legal team filed a motion to delay the proceedings the night before. The judge denied it in under an hour. Her name was Judge Patricia Mercer, 61 years old, 23 years on the federal bench. She had the particular stillness of a person who had long ago stopped being surprised by what people were capable of doing to each other for money. She had read Warren's filing over the weekend. All of it. Every exhibit. Every transfer record. Every page of Gloria Trent's forensic report. She came into that courtroom already knowing the shape of what she was looking at. Loretta Banks took the witness stand at 9:47 in the morning. She did not cry. She did not hesitate. She did not look at Clifton. She did not look at the opposing attorneys who had spent the previous 2 weeks preparing to suggest that an 89-year-old woman's memory was unreliable, that her understanding of complex financial documents was limited, that her pursuit of this case was being driven by outside parties with their own agendas. They tried that approach 3 times. 3 times, Loretta opened the spiral notebook in her hand and read back the exact date, the exact time, and the full name of every person she had spoken to, every letter she had received, every promise that had been made and broken, going back to the first processing delay letter dated 30 days after she filed her initial claim. The opposing counsel stopped trying after the third attempt. The courtroom had gone quiet in a way that had nothing to do with legal procedure. It was the quiet of people watching someone do something they had never seen done quite that way before. Not dramatic, not performative. Just a woman with a notebook and 41 years of proof, sitting in a chair and refusing, for the last time, to be dismissed. Then Warren presented the Hargrove Aldridge Holdings documents. Judge Mercer paused. She asked her clerk to confirm the case number on a secondary file sitting to the right of her bench. The clerk confirmed it. The judge looked at the courtroom. She stated for the record that based on the discovery materials submitted by the plaintiff's legal team, her court was formally identifying 214 additional individuals, all retired Mercy Regional Hospital employees, whose pension records showed identical patterns of manipulation, redirection, and suppression dating back 6 years. Loretta's case had not just won, it had broken the entire operation open. Every person who had ever been transferred and ignored and smiled at by someone who had no intention of helping them was now part of the same federal proceeding. 214 people who had been sitting at their own kitchen tables with their own folders, waiting. Clifton Hargrove pleaded guilty 4 weeks after the hearing. Federal wire fraud and elder financial exploitation. 6 years in federal prison. The Hargrove Eldridge Holdings LLC was dissolved, and its remaining assets frozen pending distribution to identified victims. Congressman Felix Drummond resigned from the Aldridge Capital Advisory Board on a Friday afternoon. One-line statement. Personal reasons. The following Monday, federal investigators arrived at his district office. His indictment was filed the same week. Trial pending. Aldridge Capital Partners suspended operations. The machine that had been running for 6 years, redirecting the retirement savings of janitors and housekeepers and maintenance workers into a private real estate portfolio, while those workers called numbers that went nowhere and waited, on letters that said nothing, stopped. Not because a regulator caught it, not because an internal whistleblower came forward, because an 89-year-old woman refused to put her folder down. The back payment arrived on a Thursday morning. 38 months of missed pension payments, calculated to the day, transferred directly to the account Loretta had held for 51 years at the same credit union on the South Side, where she and Curtis had opened it together in 1974. And the $180,000 survivor benefit. Curtis's money. The money generated the week he retired and redirected before she ever knew it existed. It was all there. Loretta did not call anyone when it arrived. She did not go out. She did not mark the occasion in any way that the outside world could see. She sat at the kitchen table. The folders were still spread across it the way they had been for 3 years. She did not move them. She picked up the photograph of Curtis that she kept on the windowsill beside the table. The same photograph she had looked at every morning while she made her calls and wrote her notes and refused to accept that the system was going to win. She held it and she said, "I got it, baby. I got all of it." Preston Wolfe sent no press release, no photograph, no public statement of any kind. His driver delivered a single handwritten note to Loretta's address on the Friday after the payment cleared. It said, "My grandmother never got hers. I'm glad you got yours. PW." Loretta read it twice. She folded it carefully and put it in the folder. Next to the carbon copy of the 1987 contract. Next to the first processing delay letter. Next to every spiral notebook page, and every certified mail receipt, and every piece of paper that represented 3 years of a woman who would not stop. She donated a portion of the back payment to a legal aid fund for retired service workers on Chicago's South Side. No announcement, no ceremony. She wrote the check and she mailed it. She still has the folder. She walked into that restaurant on New Year's Eve with nothing but 41 years of proof and the specific unbreakable courage it takes to sit down uninvited across from the most powerful person in the room and ask for what is yours. She walked out with justice. Not because a billionaire decided to be generous. Not because the system finally worked the way it was supposed to. Because she kept every letter. She wrote down every name. She showed up at every door, even after every door had already been closed in her face. And in America, for a woman like Loretta Banks, that should never have been that hard. 214 people got their money back because one woman refused to disappear. Remember that. If this story moved something in you today, subscribe to Billionaire Tales and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because right now there is someone in your life, maybe someone you love, who is fighting this exact fight alone. One phone call could change everything for them. One moment of paying attention. Be the person who sits down. Be the person who stays. And if you want to know about the billionaire who turned a quiet lunch into the most expensive mistake a sitting congressman ever made, and how one dinner reservation became the thread that unraveled a 6-year federal fraud case worth hundreds of millions of dollars, that story is coming next. The name on that case is one you will recognize. And the way it ends is something nobody in that courtroom saw coming until the very last minute. Do not miss it.